In our last video, we made the somewhat short hike out to the Liberty Bell Arch. And in today's video, we will be continuing on from there to Arizona Hot Springs. Both of these hikes share the same trailhead as well as the first 9/10 of a mile of the hike. And the other thing that they share is the same warnings. Both of these trails are closed from the middle of May through the end of September because of excessive heat. Disregarding the closure can get you a pretty hefty fine, and even worse, you might not even survive the hike to get back to your car and get your ticket. So just avoid this hike during those months. The other thing that you need to watch out for is flash floods in these slot canyons. There are a couple of different ways to get to Arizona Hot Springs. We are going to be taking the White Rock Canyon Trail, and we're also going to make a quick stop at the Liberty Bell Arch. If you do this loop with the side trail to see the arch, you're looking at an overall distance of just under 9.5 miles with 1,600 feet of elevation gain. Skipping the arch will drop the distance of the hike down to 5.9 miles. After hiking through some slightly shorter slot canyons, we hit the 9/10 of a mile mark and we found ourselves at the fork. Making a right here will take you up to the Liberty Bell Arch, and going straight will take you to Arizona Hot Springs. Our video last week went into more detail about Liberty Bell, so to see that, you can click in the upper corner right now. After visiting the arch, we made our way back to the junction and made a right to continue on our way to the hot springs. This portion of the trail definitely gets a bit more technical. There are a lot of soft sandy washes and simple down climbs. We were definitely glad that our shoes gave us a ton of traction because you're going to need it here. You are going to be following this sandy wash for about 2.2 miles all the way down to the banks of the Colorado River. The good thing is that you don't really have to worry about getting lost on this part of the trail. As long as you stay in the canyon, you should be fine. This portion of the trail is really beautiful. And one more added benefit of the towering canyon walls is that depending on what time of day you're hiking, they could give you a nice amount of shade. Even with the shade, it is very important to bring more water than you think you need on this hike. We didn't see another group on this entire section of the trail, so if you get in trouble out here, you could be out here for a while. And that's the reason for another one of our recommendations, which is bringing a GPS tracker. We use the Garmin InReach, and that allows for us to call for help if we need it. Luckily, we've never had to use the SOS function, but it's nice to know that it's there if we need it. And the other benefit of the InReach is that it allows for our friends and family to follow along with us on our journeys. The area surrounding the Colorado River is a magical place for adventurers. There is so much to explore here, and we are constantly finding new spots that we want to check out. Not only are there the hot springs that we're visiting in this video, but about 3.1 miles upstream on the Nevada side, there is the Goldstrike Hot Springs as well. If you haven't seen that video yet, be sure to click in the upper corner right now because that is a really cool hike as well. And not only that, but recently we've seen a couple other slot canyons and hot springs in the area that look like one heck of an adventure as well. Hopefully we'll be able to get out there once the weather cools down just a little bit. These deeper portions of the canyon are why I mentioned the dangers of flash flooding earlier. There are quite a few sections here where you wouldn't have anywhere to go to avoid flash floods if you encountered them. We thought that we were getting close to the hot springs when we saw water seeping out of the rock walls. But it turns out that we still had a somewhat strenuous 3/4 of a mile to go. We were definitely making progress though, and as we rounded a couple more corners, the Colorado River started to come into sight. And not only that, but the mountains that you see in the background, that's Nevada, so you're actually looking into another state. As we reached the riverbank, we found a nice little camp setup. It appeared that most of the campers had arrived by canoe. That would definitely be a lot easier than trying to hike in with a heavy pack through all of that sand and gravel. Once you get down to the river, you're going to be making a left and going around the campsite to continue on the trail. The path can get a tiny bit faint at times. There are some signs that mark the way, but basically all you have to do is trace the Colorado River. If you enjoy taking pictures of your travels, there are so many beautiful viewpoints on this part of the hike. At one point we found this really pretty rocky outcropping that stuck out over the river, and we thought it would be a cool spot for a picture. Unfortunately, as we were enjoying the view, a gust of wind came and ripped V's hat off and threw it into the river. I swam out in the really cold water to go get it, but unfortunately it sunk below the waves just before I could get to it. Hopefully it will resurface at some point and someone can get a cool souvenir from their trip. After making it to the second beach, we started what was probably the steepest climb of the hike. The route got even more faint at this point, but there were some yellow arrows pointing the way. We would much rather see some rock curtains rather than paint on the rocks, but unfortunately what is done is done. You will be getting a tiny break to catch your breath at this spectacular view before continuing on to the final part of the climb. Things get really steep here, and there's one part at the end that is almost like rock climbing. Be extra careful here because a slip would not be fun. You'll be happy to know that after the small rock climb, you are one small and not too steep hill from a little bit of a break from climbing. There are a couple small waterfalls that you'll be climbing up, and hopefully the ladder is there to get you up to the hot springs, but the tricky parts are done for a little bit. When we got to the bottom of this hill, we were once again a little bit confused on which way to go. There weren't any arrows pointing the way, so we ended up turning right. This is the way to go if you would like to go back down to the Colorado River, but luckily a very nice camper told us that the hot springs were the other direction. So after you make a left at the bottom of the hill, you should start to see signs of water very quickly. Your shoes are going to get wet here, so if you're trying to avoid that, you might want to bring some water shoes to change into. Luckily our La Sportiva shoes are meant for canyoneering and being in the water, so this is pretty much what they're meant to do. As with the 𝐿𝙞𝙨𝙘𝙡𝙀 hot springs, there is a chance that there is a very dangerous amoeba in the water here. I'm gonna make my best attempt at pronouncing it. It's Naegleria fowleri. Whether I pronounce that correctly or not, you do not want it to get into your nose, so be sure not to dunk your head underwater in the springs. After climbing a couple short waterfalls, you should hopefully find yourself at the ladder up to the hot springs. I say hopefully because there are times where the ladder does get washed away by flash floods. If you're planning on doing this hike, it might not hurt to check websites like AllTrails to see if anyone mentioned the condition of the ladder. If the ladder is gone, you will only be able to access the hot springs from the Arizona Hot Springs Trail. And now for some quick hot springs etiquette. Please be sure to pack out all of your trash. If you need to use the restroom, please leave the hot springs before doing it. You can help keep the water of the springs clean by not using any soap or shampoo in it. Please do not use any glass bottles in the springs because if they break, it is going to be a big mess. And last but not least, don't forget to check the temperature of the pools because it got hotter the closer that we got to the source. After a nice little soak, we decided that it was probably time to start heading back. We were feeling extra ambitious and we had one more short hike that we wanted to hit this day. I'm really glad that we did this hike as a loop because both trails have something special to offer. The White Rock Canyon Trail has much better slot canyons and some beautiful scenery. And it also takes you to beautiful views of the Colorado River. The Arizona Hot Springs Trail, on the other hand, is the shortest and easiest route to the hot springs. It is also beautiful and it has some fun little rock scrambles along the way. You're going to spend a lot of time just following the canyon walls like you did on the White Rock Canyon Trail. And there are also some more painted arrows pointing you in the right direction. We were happy that we only found a couple of pieces of trash on the trail and we cleaned those up. If everyone could pick up a piece of trash or two on their hikes, we could keep these trails looking pretty awesome. And we also found this really cool spot where someone had stacked a ton of rocks to create the trail. That looked like a lot of work, so whoever did that, thank you, that's pretty cool. Shortly after we passed this sign, it was time to begin the final climb of this hike. And it is a doozy. The one thing that we were happy about though was that even though we had to climb this monstrous hill, it was being done on hard-packed dirt. The miles of hiking on sand and gravel had worn us out, and it was really nice to be able to step without sinking into the ground for a second. While this isn't anywhere near the steepest hill that we've ever climbed, it is fairly long and relentless. And it definitely makes sense why they closed this trail in the summer. I can't even begin to imagine trying to climb this hill when it's 120 degrees or hotter outside. After a couple of breaks, a little bit of sweating, and even a little bit of wheezing, we made our way to the top. And I'm happy to say that at this point you will pretty much be done climbing. I say pretty much because the wash that takes you back to the parking lot is supposedly a little bit of an uphill, but it's one of those things where it's at such a small angle that you can hardly even tell. You only have about 3/4 of a mile left in the hike at this point, and the good thing is that you can see the bridge, so that gives you a little bit of added motivation. The only bummer is that after enjoying just a little bit more of that nice hard-packed dirt, you're going to be dropping back down into the wash and finishing off the hike the way you started it, in the gravel and sand. This hike was definitely one of the highlights of our trip, and it's funny to think that after all of these years of coming to Vegas, we had no clue that there was so much beauty just waiting to be explored. Do you have any suggestions for our next trip to the Vegas area? If so, please let us know. We would love to hear about them in the comments below. Well, that is going to do it for this one. Be sure to check back next week when we head to Spooky Canyon. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe because we release new adventures every week. And for all the information about this hike as well as other awesome things to do in Nevada, head on over to thatadventurelife.com.